Welcome to HBTV. We have a terrific show today. I'm taking on the topic of equality with a real expert on the topic, Don Watkins. Don wrote the book, Equal is Unfair. And he's the author of 4 books, has more in the works, including a novel. Don, welcome to HBTV. I'm going to ask Nikos to show us his books. So
they don't fit in one go, but this is the most relevant one, and perhaps this is the first one and the most famous one till the next one.
Thank you.
And Razi, can you put them on Amazon, the links on the chat?
All right, let's begin. The topic is the drive for equality, the worship of equality. As the man who wrote the book on it, what is this all about, Don?
Well, I wrote the book with Yaron Brook, and the reason that we wrote it was that for years, left-leaning thinkers, particularly economists, had been trying to get Americans to care about this idea of rising inequality, and nobody did care. And then in around 2015, a French economist, Thomas Piketty, wrote a book that just kind of exploded, took off. And since then, it's no longer even an issue that's debated. Everybody knows that inequality is a problem, and it's a central question and concern that should be at the forefront of our minds for every political issue, whether it's something to do with the environment, whether it's something to do with the economy, whether it's something to do with race, sex, class. All of these are to be thought of in terms of equality or inequality. And the way that I think about it is that that is a philosophic claim that we should view things this way, and it should not be taken as obvious or for granted that inequality is something we should be concerned with.
Yeah, I was shocked in the end of my undergraduate education in philosophy. A professor referred to our intuitions. I had thought that no respectable person would bring in intuitions into a discussion of anything. But here he was bringing it into philosophy. And since then, it's become an accepted standard that you decide what's right or wrong by reference to your intuitions. Now, your intuitions means your emotions. And your emotions come from your thinking, from your values and your conclusions that you've automatized. The deep intuitions that you have come from things that you automatize before you're perhaps too young to think it through logically. Perhaps you just automatize what mommy said. So a lot of times when people are talking about intuitions, they mean my mother's feelings that I absorbed as a little child before I could think clearly. So intuitions have no place, none, zero place in philosophy. Philosophy deals with what you can observe and what you can conceptualize from what you observe and what you can prove from what you've conceptualized. So let's talk about the idea that inequality is unfair. Your book is Equal is Unfair. The egalitarian movement, as it used to be known, the worship of equality, holds that there's something wrong with inequality, right?
Yeah, and they'll often present it in terms of like simple sort of intuitive thought experiments, which amount to, okay, if there was $1 million dumped on a table and we're all sitting in a room, what's the fair way to divide it up? And most people say, well, of course, the way that you divide it up is equally. It'd be unfair if Harry said, I'm going to take 75% and I'll leave the rest for you guys to fight over. And what they never put on the table is, does that really carry over into the kinds of scenarios we're interested in when we're thinking about who has rightful claims and a value like money. Because the fact is that money is not dumped into, quote, society's lap. It's produced by the activities of different individuals. And you have a very different intuition if we walk into a room and I have in my wallet $1,000 that I earned, and you have in your wallet $10,000 that you earned. And then it's, well, what's the right way to divide it up? And most people would say, wait, why are we dividing it up? You earned it, it's yours. And so what the inequality movement has done is tried to get us to think about wealth as if it were this collective prize that was dumped in our laps to be divided up, rather than an earned creation that in effect we all bring to the table in our dealings with one another.
Yeah, and I want to clarify one thing you said. It's not really about money. It's about what money can buy, which is real goods, real wealth, not paper money, because you can, as we've seen in the COVID relief plan and the infrastructure plan, you can print money with abandon if you're a government and can force that fiat money upon the populace. The real issue of equality or inequality is the goods and services that that money can buy. That's the thing that's produced. It's wealth, not money, right?
Yes, and I think ultimately, I mean, I think the way I put it was any values, because ultimately this view gets expanded beyond economics. So it's viewed as unfair that some people are more beautiful than others. Some people are more intelligent than others. Some people enjoy more prestige or respect or admiration than others. And there's a real push throughout life to say that whatever the value is, by default, it should be equal. And if it's not, there is an injustice, or at least we should be very, very suspicious that there's an injustice.
Right, because I've been reading about this in philosophy since 1964 or so, under the heading of determinism. The theory that is prevalent is that no one earns his looks or his talent or his brains, and therefore no one, or what time period he's born into. So therefore no one earns his living, his income, his wealth that supposedly he makes. It's regarded as an accident. Okay, Warren Buffett was born with a love of analyzing stocks and the brains to do it. But the guy passing you on the corner wasn't lucky. He didn't get the genotype that made him able to do what Warren Buffett did. So it's unfair that Warren Buffett uses his genetic endowment to make a lot of money, and the guy on the street corner can't, because his genetic endowment, which is given to you, is not as good. And the premise of this is that you are born with a set of desires, drives, talents, intelligence, and what you do is of no consequence, that you don't make yourself. Ayn Rand said, man is a being of self-made soul. You develop your talents, even if you're, let's say, very tall, that doesn't make you Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan had to work incredibly hard over many years to develop his talent. Now, it might be that somebody shorter who worked as many hours wouldn't get the ability of a Michael Jordan. But what difference does that make? Why is that an issue at all, that some people have more equipment when everybody has to develop the equipment they have? It's like, the way I see it, if I may harangue you here, Don, is that we're born with a certain amount of maximum horsepower. But the maximum, meaning intellectual ability, really, brain power, because that's what controls all the rest. The upper limit is probably 400 horsepower, and maybe some people only inherit 300 horsepower. And I'm not talking about autistic people or retarded people. but the normal type. Most people never take their cars out of first gear. They never drive them in a straight line. They never take it over 15 miles an hour. So it doesn't matter that they don't have this huge horsepower because they're not using what they do have. And therefore the issue is not, oh, well, you were born to make a lot of money, you're just lucky. That if man has free will, and he does, that is not a valid argument that you don't earn what you get.
I think that's so important. And I mean that because you think this really is a deliberate attempt to erase the distinction I carved out at the beginning, right? The difference between you have a bunch of values dumped in our laps, how do we divide it up, versus we each earn something and bring it to the table in effect. What they're trying to say is even if you went out into the world and think you earned something that now, we're in the room, so I don't get a piece of it, you didn't really earn it for the reasons that you outlined. And part of what's going on there is that they're trying to create as the standard of earning that it has to be fully self-created, including all the conditions that went into it. So unless you were God who created yourself out of nothing, and even then, that's not even a coherent idea, then you can't, that's what it would mean to have credit, to actually earn something. But as you suggest, what really goes on in life is that we all face different opportunities and obstacles. And what free will is the ability to take use of the opportunities that we have, including our mental horsepower potential, and navigate around whatever hurdles we are. And for each individual, we can make better or worse decisions at each decision point, given those opportunities and given those obstacles. And to say somebody earned something is to say they made good decisions that resulted in this outcome. It's not to say that they were responsible for everything that went into that causal sequence.
Right. They didn't invent the wheel. They didn't create the system of highways. They didn't make the United States government up for themselves. They didn't discover Newton's laws. So they didn't do what they did. But yeah, if you look at two people, each of whom have those advantages, and one of them invents the iPhone and the other one doesn't, and doesn't even do anything more than paint houses, it's not because of some innate talent that one has and the other doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, the question is not, would Bill Gates have created Microsoft if he had been born in a different time or with a different brain? The question is, did he make the choices that resulted in the achievement of Microsoft given when he was born and the brain he had versus the alternatives that were open to him? And there were many alternatives open to him at many points. He could have stayed in Harvard. He could have said, I'm not going to spend so much time in the lab learning how to code software. I'm interested in dating, or I'm interested in anything else that he could have done with his time. He made certain choices that had that result. And you can't erase that from existence by saying that I can imagine other scenarios under which he wouldn't have created Microsoft. That's completely irrelevant to the issue.
Yeah, a person creates what he creates. The fact that he didn't create the materials out of which he created is irrelevant. Two people have the same materials. One makes something good, and the other one goes to a bar. It's you make what you make. Now, the argument, well, if Columbus hadn't discovered America, somebody else would. The time was ripe. If somebody hadn't invented the PC, somebody else would. I mean, Bill Gates didn't invent the PC. IBM did that, but whoever you want to call it, Schottky invented the transistor. If he hadn't done it, given the state of knowledge, somebody else would have. Yeah, some other person of equal ability and talent, maybe a little later, maybe right then, maybe years later, but then you would be saying the same thing about him that you're saying about Schottky, about Columbus. Yeah, he would then be the guy who deserves the credit. But in fact, nothing is going to make George Costanza from Seinfeld into the discovery of a new continent or the inventor of an electronic device. It's just not, it's not something that anybody can do.
And if you think about the motivations of creators, if it really were, at the end of this hard process of creation, you'll receive no recognition, no rewards because, hey, somebody else could have done it, or, you wouldn't have done it if you had different parents. If a creator really believed that, the idea that they would struggle and then offer to society that creation as martyrs, I think is, you shouldn't depend on that. And I mean, we're both fans of Ayn Rand, to say the least. And the part of what she explores in Atlas Shrugged is what happens when you treat creators as if they're not creators and don't recognize their right to engage in creation and then to be rewarded, and including with the moral accolades they deserved for their creativity.
Yes, I remember Ayn Rand at a Ford Hall Forum question period was asked this question in the form of, well, didn't previous achievements make possible the achievement of Thomas Edison, the other people you're calling the great creators? And she said, yes, they did. And all of them want one thing from you: to be left free and to be given gratitude. I guess that's two things. All they ask from you is to leave them free and give them the gratitude they deserve. So I think that really cuts through it. The fact that the kind of people you're trying to run down, which is what equality is all about, running down the great people. The fact that some other great person could have been first is not an answer. A mediocrity could never have done it. And there are lots of people who are below the level of mediocrity in our society. So people create what they create. And the fact that what might have been if somebody else were there, or if they had had different parents, is irrelevant. They created it.
I think the whole way of looking at the world through the lens of inequality, just the way that it desensitizes you to even be interested in the issue of creation. Like, that should really be a primary question. Like, all the things I want in life and all the things I have and enjoy, how did they get here and what's required to have more of them? It's that perspective on what are the cause and effect relationships to lead to the things that I want in life. And instead, the whole orientation is just to take where we are as given, not ask how we got here or where we're going, and just say, well, we have to divide it up in a way that's, quote, fair, which really means taking away from people who have more, even if they have more, because they were the ones who made possible the cornucopia that exists on Earth today versus 500 years ago.
The more I listen to you and think about this, the more I'm reminded of the Fountainhead. I know you're wearing an Atlas Shrugged t-shirt, but
I like both.
Yeah. The Fountainhead is a story about the struggle of a great creator in architecture, was his field, against the forces of society led by the villain, who are struggling to deny greatness, to say that every man is as great as every other man, and to demand equality for all, enforced at the point of a gun, of course. So really the theme of the Fountainhead, as Ayn Rand herself named it, was individualism versus collectivism, not in politics, but in a man's soul. The hero is an individualist in his soul. The villain and the subsidiary villains are collectivists in their soul. Now, I'd like to say something about collectivism in your soul. The whole equality concern, forget whether you're for it or against it, the whole idea of looking at equality, at how you stack up relative to other people, is a collectivized, socialized mind at work. A virtuous man, an independent man, does not judge himself by relation to others. He does not say, gosh, I'm in the third quartile here and I really want to get into the first. He does not invent thinking, I wonder if anybody else is working on this. I wonder if I'm going to be beaten. I wonder if somebody else is going to have a better invention. Boy, I wish I were the only guy inventing things. That is so foreign to the mentality that's right, that lifted mankind out of the cave, that it isn't even funny. The equality worship is a cover for I'm a loser. I see around me all kinds of successful people, and they make me feel like crap by comparing myself to them. I want them brought down. I don't want to have to look at any good, rich, creative, successful, famous people. I want everybody to be no better than me, because that would stop me from feeling as much self-hatred. That's the psychology of it. The concern with equality is a concern with other people and their view of you. The worst of it is envy. The lowest level is envy, not just a desire for what they have, but the hatred of them because they've got what you wish you had. That is the lowest human emotion.
Yeah. And one way it is the lowest human emotion. It's hard for people, I think, good people, to even get that it's plausible. And the way I try to explain it is, if you've ever had a moment of, somebody enters a room and like they're really good looking, or, they're really rich, and you just have a fleeting feeling of you're kind of aware of your own insecurities in some part of your life. Imagine if that wasn't just a fleeting feeling, but it was how you felt all the time, that other people's achievements were just making you aware of your inferiority. And so you wanted to lash out and show them you're not so great. And that's kind of the mentality that then erects entire systems of thought to justify such an ugly feeling. Though I do want to raise a question for you, Harry, which is, we've been talking about the great creators versus these kind of people who are, feel inferior and are filled with envy and lashing out. And people might, I think, rightfully ask, well, like, look, I'm not a Bill Gates. And I mean, I'm certainly not a Bill Gates. And it's, well, what's your, like, how do I fit in if inequality is like not a value? Does he just get to reap all the rewards and I'm a nobody? How do you think about the fact that how do you think about this issue that, most of us aren't going to be these stellar achievers? How does taking inequality off the table as a concern, how does that impact, the rest of us?
From each according to his ability, to each according to his ability. So whatever ability you have, that's what you will get in a system that respects the rights of everyone. You will not be given more than you've earned, but you won't have what you earn taken away from you to give to others who have less than what you earn. So the people who are most in need of respect for earning and property rights are the lower and middle classes, the people who depend upon the achievements of the great creators to have a high standard of living, because that's what they're doing. They're creating for a mass market, and they're raising up your standard of living. I mean, think of the jobs that exist today that could not exist in a pre-industrial society. And I'm not just talking about marketing consultant. Suppose you're a person of modest intelligence, modest strength, modest ability. You're Joe the plumber. Well, there's no plumbing before the Industrial Revolution. Suppose you're even not as creative as that guy. Suppose you're someone whose ability only makes you able to answer the telephone or clean homes. Detail cars. Even plumbing is beyond you. Well, none of those things exist if cars haven't been invented and perfected, and electricity hasn't been invented and supplied. So if you go into 1200 AD, there weren't any car detailers, right? There weren't any elevator operators. There weren't any phone answerers. There weren't any home cleaners. Well, I guess there were, you could have a straw broom, and people didn't have anything but dirt floors. So I don't know what good that would do for you. But I think outside of palaces, no one got employed to clean other people's homes. So the achievements of the great creators raise everybody up, everything we have. I mean, we're sitting here talking over thousands of miles across continents with pictures streaming. Where did that come from? How did we do that? It's through technology that has to be invented, on the basis of science discovered in earlier periods and applied, and then savings have to be applied to producing it. I recommend anyone who's mouthing the idea of equality to listen to a single episode of Shark Tank. Shark Tank is about venture capitalists who are deciding whether to fund ventures or not to. And you'll see from that how the savings of the rich make possible the advancement of the people of modest means, because they invest in the businesses of big and little other firms to earn a higher rate of profit. So I wanted to say something more philosophical on the collectivism line, but you maybe want to jump in here.
Well, I want to make one sort of point about that, and just to integrate what you said with the inequality way of looking at things, which is ultimately, if we're treating inequality as a primary value, then even though you might be right that allowing this enormous inequality works to everyone's advantage, we still should prefer a state of more equality and less advantage. And indeed, they've done polls about people and asked them, like, would you prefer a more equal society, but everybody is less well off than in a more unequal society? And it's shocking, at least to me, how many people say, yeah, I'd prefer to be us all poorer, but more equal. And I mean, it reminds me of, you have an article, why Buy American is un-American, and you really paint the picture of, like, two different worlds, one where you're just as you are now, but everybody's kind of like less beautiful than you, less intelligent than you, less productive than you, and then living in a world populated by gods where you're at the bottom. And it's in the godly world that you would just be living the best life possible, even though on the rank order of inequality, you'd be worse off.
Yeah, and let me run with that a little bit, Don.
Please.
Thank you. In one world, you're at the top of the pyramid. You're at the position supposedly everyone has to stop people from getting to, because it's so desirable to the selfish bastards who are in it, which is everybody is poorer than you, everybody is less athletic than you, everybody is less good looking than you, and everybody is lazier than you. You're the most productive, the most smart, the most beautiful, the most brilliant. Okay, now that's supposed to be heaven on earth, right? Everybody's inferior to you, which is another way of saying you look around and everybody is ugly, stupid, slow, and offers you pretty much nothing. So even if they regard you as a god dropped from the sky, they can give you the best of what they have. The best animal skin, the biggest mud hut that they've got, which might be 15% bigger than the average, and the most fertile woman to mate with, who you can imagine what she will look like. And in the other world, everybody's more beautiful than you. You look around and you say, my God, this must be Sweden. Everybody is richer than you. So they think nothing of giving you $10,000 as a tip. They've got money to burn. Everybody is smarter than you. So they make inventions like out of Star Trek, and you get to use them. So you're on the bottom, but you live to be 500 years old in a body tailored by genetic engineering, which they've invented, being such super brains. And you are forced to take a vacation on one of the less fashionable planets. Whereas in the other world, the world where you're on the top, boy, I got it made, you die in a disease, in an epidemic that sweeps through when you're 30. And most of the people are disfigured by the diseases that have already swept through and they have no cure for because they're stupid and lazy. So it's to the interest, the selfish interest of you, that people be better than you. This is known in tennis. You want to play tennis with somebody better than you, but it's true in everything. You want to go to a school where people are smarter than you. You want to live in a neighborhood where people are richer than you. You want to be around people who are better looking than you. This is very much to your interest. So equality is not a value to you. Inequality is a value to you if you can be around people who are better. And let's ask the basic question now, Don. To whom is equality a value? Now, I don't mean who likes it. I mean, you've got one world where everybody's exactly equal, and you've got another world where there are radical inequalities. Who is it that prefers the first to the second? I don't mean of the inhabitants. I mean, to whom is it beneficial that there be one distribution rather than the other? It isn't beneficial to the participants. What's beneficial to them is that they have the highest standard of living they can. So why is the relative height of income of any concern of anybody? It isn't. It isn't, unless you looking at it as, I want people to be richer than me. I want them, not that they have taken anything away from me. And I should make clear that in both worlds, you're the same. And you enter it with the same abilities and money that you in either case. It's just that other people have a lot less or other people have a lot more. So the fact that there's a certain pattern, you know, like the peaks of the income come in prime numbers, or that it forms a perfect normal distribution, or that it's flat, or that it's jagged and discontinuous. And who is the guy in the sky to whom this is a good pattern? This is the pattern you should live your life to achieve. There isn't any. And in terms of you, the individual, what matters is how well off am I? And how much chance do I have to interact with someone better off so I can profit?
Yeah,
Gentlemen, is this a good time to start to jump to some questions? Or Don, have you got a reply to this? And then we go to questions?
No, we can go to questions. That's fine.
Okay. So first of all, many thanks to our super chatters. Many thanks to Bonnie. Many thanks to Marilyn. Those of you who've asked questions, I'm getting to them in a second. But Don and Harry, so I don't know if you've noticed lately, particularly in corporate lingo, people use more and more now the term equity rather than equality. So it's even more vague and it means even less. But for example, you see universities or football teams saying we are committed to equity, or people saying that the BLM salute in football, it's not about BLM, it's about equity. So have you got any understanding of why we have this term, and is it so that we go to something which is even emptier and even more vague than equality, which at least means something specific?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That it's exactly to fog up the screen. The term that's missing is justice. John Rawls, who launched the modern worship of equality, wrote his book, A Theory of Justice, and his theory of justice has nothing to do with justice. It's like social justice, right? Social justice means individual injustice. Justice is rational behavior towards other people, treating people as you know they objectively deserve by a rational standard of morality. It's equity is a kind of appeal to emotions that, well, if you feel it's unfair, we don't have to show that it's exactly unequal. It's enough that you feel it just isn't right. And again, that feeling comes from either your mother, or if you're exceptional, you're thinking about it in college before you read Ayn Rand, probably. But if you've read Ayn Rand, you will have a lot different, quote, intuitions and feelings about what's equitable.
Okay. So, Don, have you got a comment or shall we go to super chats?
Well, I would say that, I mean, I agree with all of that. I mean, one way to think about, to go to the social justice aspect is, you know, if one of the implications of a proper individual based view of justice is that, like, when should people be penalized? It's you're penalized for the wrongs that you've done. And what social justice in effect says is, no, we're going to penalize the people who have not been wronged or who have not done wrong in order to reward people who have not been wronged. And it's a complete inversion of justice in what they're trying to achieve.
Like the reparations movement, where somebody who happens to have the same skin color as someone 150 years ago who was treated badly by someone 150 years ago puts a mortgage on you because you have a different skin color than you have the same skin color as his slave owner. Whereas I would bet a majority of people by now, I'm willing to take a wager on this, but I got to be close even if I'm wrong. I bet more than 50% of Americans today had no ancestor in this country prior to the Civil War when the slaves were free. So
but Harry,
none
they
of
would
them
say that if you are white today, you benefit, let's say, from the legacy of the slavery.
Oh, God, you really handed it to me now, Nikos. Slavery does not benefit anyone. Slavery is the destruction of wealth. Slavery holds down the standard of living of everyone, even the slave master in the long run. It is not practical to deal with men as animals. Man's value to you is as a thinking, creative, productive being, and that means free. The story of Russia versus the United States, Soviet Russia, is a story of the mind held down by force cannot advance the way the semi-free mind in the United States is able to advance. So all of human history teaches one lesson. You cannot have progress under slavery. What you'll have is stagnation and rebellion. So the whites did not benefit from slavery. That's an insult to blacks. That's saying you blacks are no better than animals. You couldn't have created anything that would aid our standard of living. You're beasts of burden. So when people saddled you up, that was the best use of you. It's not you, it's your ancestors. If you're black, you can't achieve. You can't do anything. So that's why whites got an immense advantage of enslaving you. No, the white, and look at the South versus the North. The North got rich because it didn't have slavery. The South stagnated because it did. So no, you do not benefit from violating the rights of anyone. That's why we have rights, to codify that everyone needs to keep his hands off everyone else for everyone's sake.
And let me just add, to connect this to the inequality thing, if you're discussing reparations and you're focused on the fact of, look, there were these injustices and maybe they propagate through time, you're still viewing things from the perspective of justice, even though if you're wrong to think of justice in terms of skin color groups and so on, and that, you know, I should be held responsible, you know, based on my ancestors. But think about what the inequality perspective is really doing. It's saying, no, that whole perspective is wrong, because we shouldn't care about individuals. And indeed, from the inequality perspective, what they want to do is, in effect, not equally liberate us, but equally enslave us. So it's everybody is going to have their lives and their economic lives under totalitarian control by the government. And I mean, because that's the precondition. The only way you can have the government equalizing is if it has the ability to take from you any and every value that you create and that you're responsible for, and eviscerate it or give it away to others. And so you can't claim to care about individual justice, including the injustice of slavery, I think, from an egalitarian kind of perspective.
Yeah, it's an advocacy of slavery. And here we have it from the villain of the Fountainhead, Ellsworth Toohey. I want power, he says in a speech to another character in the novel. I want power. I want my world of the future. Let all live for all. Let all sacrifice and none profit. Let all suffer and none enjoy. Let progress stop. Let all stagnate. There's equality in stagnation. All subjugated to the will of all. Universal slavery without even the dignity of a master. Slavery to slavery. A great circle and a total equality. Close quote from the Fountainhead.
Right.
Yeah, it's power. That's what the equality movement, the drive for equality is a drive to run other people's lives. And that is evil.
All right. So let's go to questions then. So, Michael, many thanks for your contributions and your many questions. So, do you honestly believe objectivism will have gained enough credibility to start having a serious impact on the culture in the next 20 to 50 years? Or are we slowly and steadily collapsing into a dark age as we speak?
First of all, I don't know. But if you ask my opinion and you give me 50 years, I think it is very likely that objectivism will have a significant impact, because that's the kind of time scale that other intellectual movements that were reversing course, they're intellectual movements where they just surf the wave, like the socialist movements, Bernie Sanders and so forth, in America, are surfing the wave of altruism and collectivism that started in right after the American Revolution in Europe. So if you're going along with the crowd and just offering a new form of the same old stuff, you can get where you're going pretty fast. But if you're reversing things like in the Renaissance or in the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, reversing for bad, it takes a long time. However, we got the internet, so I'm talking to you now. And we have more objectivist intellectuals now by far, probably 10 times the number of intellectuals that we had 30 years ago. So I'm reasonably optimistic, particularly if you give me 50 years, but I don't know. There's a lot of bad stuff happening. So you have to take Ayn Rand's motto. Anyone who fights for the future lives in it today. You have to do what you can do now, because that action will put you in the world of the future. You'll be advancing your values regardless of whether you win or not. It's not perfect, but it will make you better off than you would if you didn't fight for your values.
So, Don, your, professional mission is to make sure that the ideas of freedom and of objectivism are spread in a more efficient way. So are you optimistic, and what's your 50 years prediction, as our friend asks?
I'm really opposed to this kind of question, because my view is not like I'm going to take a poll to decide whether to fight for my values and try to achieve the best that I can in the world. I'm going to do it until I die or get thrown in a prison. And so it's completely irrelevant to me what the odds are. And particularly if we're talking on, like time scale, it's relevant to know what is achievable in the short term, because that can help you decide on the kinds of activities you undertake. But if we're talking about the very long term, there's no action implication. And so I'm an optimist by nature, but I deliberately try to work to have no regard for that kind of question, because what really, there's kind of two outcomes that can happen. Either you can become so pessimistic that you give up the courage to and willingness to even pursue your values in this world, and that's a tragedy and a waste of your life, or you become complacent, and that doesn't do you any good either. It's, oh yeah, well, objectivism, we've got this one in the bag. I'm going to go I'm going to forget about trying to uphold my ideals. And so my view is just simply, what do I want? What do I care about? What do I believe? And then what can I do to push the ball forward on those fronts that I want to do?
What about the Ayn Rand Center at UK? I mean, talking about the progress, I agree with what Don said, but it's good to not feel like you're fighting a hopeless battle. But look at, I'd never heard of Razi or Nikos 2 years ago, and now they've got something on every single day of the week. It's phenomenal, and we've got the internet, to spread our ideas. So there are a lot of things to be optimistic about, but in the end, you do what you want to do, meaning you pursue your values and you speak out rather than giving up.
Let me say one thing that maybe will help people become more optimistic, which is, and this goes to kind of Harry's point about, like, we've seen a lot of kind of growth, but you have to think about it in terms of the one area where objectivists, and particularly the Ayn Rand Institute, have been outstanding is, once you become interested in Ayn Rand, it is easier than ever to understand her ideas and to build a career around them. That's a solved problem, or at least a mostly solved problem. What's the other problem? Get more people interested. Hold on, my son has arrived. I'm in the middle of a meeting. I will be right down. So that is a solved problem. The unsolved problem is how to get more people interested, how to get them to want to engage in that training. And so if you think about it as all we need to do is solve that problem, that seems doable.
I think you have a little presence behind you, Don. A gremlin has appeared.
And also, it's always what I think it was. I heard it first time from Yaron, which said, you have to be an example with your life. Like, you live a happy life, you're a cool person, and then you persuade people by your living example. You don't tell them, oh, I've read this book and it has these good ideas, but I'm completely miserable and directionless in life. So you have to also lead by example, I would say.
Yeah. And speaking of books, let me think of when this would be, before the mid 80s, other than the books of Ayn Rand, there was one objectivist book. That was Leonard Peikoff's The Ominous Parallels. In 1988-89, a couple of other books appeared, including the most important, which actually 91, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. Now, there's so many books. I have a bookcase over here, and there's like 2 shelves this wide. I'm holding my hands about 2.5 feet apart. It's about 5 feet of books on good books. Back then there were more books by enemies of objectivism on objectivism than by objectivists. And now we've totally swamped them. There's books on each of Ayn Rand's novels. There's books by Don Watkins. There's books by me, which maybe Nikos will hold up. There he is. How we know on objectivist epistemology or epistemology from an objectivist base. And there's so many other books on why businessmen need philosophy. I'm not going to go over all the titles because I'll probably draw a blank, but I'm telling you, there's like 40 books. I can't even keep up with them. So that is a tremendous advantage on our side. Plus, go on YouTube and search for Ayn Rand and objectivism. And I alone have like 20 YouTube episodes of various things on there. So there's a tremendous amount of material.
Yeah, consider becoming a member of ARC UK. Not only you get the chance to ask Harry questions, we have the communication bootcamp on Thursdays with Don. So again, I've said it 1 million times. I've learned more from Don on writing and communication than I have in all my years in school, university, or whatever. So only for ARC UK members, every Thursday we have a session with Don. But also let me say about the Objectivist Academic Center, it's the intellectual training program run by the Ayn Rand Institute. ARI is sponsoring these events, but even if they were not sponsoring their events, I've benefited a lot from OSE. I'm a graduate of it. And if you think about an intellectual career, that's the place to start. And also, if you're thinking, oh, I want to be like one day like Yaron, like Harry, I want to be out there spreading objectivism. Where do I start from? Where do you start from is the OAC. I don't know if you're going to achieve it, but that's a place to start.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go for some more questions.
Okay,
so, Michael, I'm going to mix up a bit the order of your questions. So, are you sure disintegration too, and this I assume refers to Leonard Peikoff's the dim hypothesis. Do you think that disintegration too cannot win as a governing strategy? The Khmer Rouge in Cambodia were D2. So D2, if I understand well, means nihilism, complete disintegration, and they took power. Does egalitarianism comes out of Kant's categorical imperative, or is it something separate? So basically 2 questions, egalitarianism and if complete disintegration can gain power.
Well, complete disintegration can't gain power as long as there's anybody putting forward a good, positive alternative. Back when Leonard Peikoff gave a course on the rise of Nazism in 1969, he made the point that Hitler could not rise until all the opposition had been silenced. Now, the communist opposition was okay, but you couldn't have any anti-statist, anti-collectivist opposition for the Nazis to really take over and install a dictatorship. The communists and the Nazis are one and the same. So that's like 2 rival mafia groups that they're not fighting each other. But as long as someone's standing up for justice and right, like we are, the nihilists can't win because they're nihilists. So I don't think that's a problem. The second one was what? I've forgotten.
So the second one was, is egalitarianism related?
Kant.
Yeah.
You know, I've never thought of connecting it to the categorical imperative per se, and I don't think it is. Kant, I mean, it comes from Kant in the way that Kant saved religion from science and the morality of sacrifice from self-interest. At the time he wrote the Enlightenment, self-interest was at a high point. The philosophers thought, well, self-interest is good, but concern for others is good too. So you have to have both some kindness towards others and charity and some self-interest. And Kant closed the door to the scientific worldview, made it unacceptable, and reinstated the religious morality. He was raised as a pietist, and he was a mama's boy. So he had this incredible system of philosophy with unbelievably complicated wording. I can't call it argument, to convince people that the reality they think they see is not really there. And what's not really there is the reality that they think they see. In other words, you live in your own delusions. And he saved altruism. But specifically, his ethics was below egalitarianism. His goal was not to make everyone equal. It was to make everyone suffer. He held that the only thing that has moral worth is action from duty for duty's sake. And the only time you can know that you've acted from duty's sake is when you suffer. Because psychologically, there could always be a self-interested motive. But if you do something that you think is your duty and harm yourself in the process and lose, then you can know that you've hit the moral jackpot. So his system was sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice. Egalitarianism, equality worship, is sacrifice for the sake of an even distribution of goods.
Though notice the similarity to the point that Harry made earlier, which is inequality is not a value to anyone. There's no beneficiary. Like
That's
people
true.
might desire it, but it's just this thing that doesn't actually have any benefit to anyone. And Kant's view was, well, that's exactly the kind of thing morality is concerned with. Things
Yes.
that are not to benefit anyone. And so, Kant had a certain view of what your duties were. But in effect, the inequality perspective comes along and says, what your duty is to achieve equality. For whose sake? Nobody's.
Well, and it is Kantian in this way. Kant thought the proof, what Kant thought the proof of morality was? The sense of conscience and duty. The guilt that you feel when you do the wrong thing. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. That he thought was the only proof that there are, beyond reason, beyond our ability to prove or explain, a claim on us from another dimension. And that's exactly what the egalitarian movement holds. But he's worse than they because he thinks if you get anything out of it, even if you're doing what's right, if you get something out of it, you can't know you did the right thing. So to do the right thing, you must sacrifice, you must suffer, you must die ultimately.
Speaking
And
of
just,
Kant,
I won't go into this, but I'll just put it on the table also. Kant was a direct influence on John Rawls, who we've talked about.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's another avenue to look for influence if you're interested in how Kant shaped our thinking about equality and inequality.
and if you're interested in Kant, Don, are you still running the Kant reading group?
Well, I was never doing a reading group. I was writing kind of analyses and summaries of the critique, but I put that on hold because I'm doing a book that I think is more important, or at least I'm more interested in it right now.
Okay. By the way, let me say for those of you who don't know that you can find Don's work and his newsletter, which is a source of gold information for free. Go to www.donswriting.com or just follow Don on Twitter and see on his Twitter bio the link, and you can follow his work and his newsletter. Again, it's definitely worth it. Okay, more questions. So thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much, William. Very generous contributions. Thanks again, Marilyn. So, okay, Michael, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Christopher. Okay, so more questions. I'm not sure about what the context of this question is, but so Michael says, Harry, do you still believe Jordan Peterson has some relation with Nazi and philosophy? I don't know what this refers to, but question goes on. Peterson emphasizes the Enlightenment and individualism quite often. So, Harry, have you alluded that Peterson is related to
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that Jordan Peterson is a Nazi. He isn't. He's a civilized, decent person. But with the basic premise that you have inherited innate ideas, you're in the same camp with racial collectivism of the Nazi kind. Freud was in it too. So Freud also believed in innate knowledge, knowledge by, inheritance. It's in your blood. It's in your blood. Now, Jordan Peterson thinks these archetypes that he got from C.G. Jung, a student of Freud, incidentally, that the archetypes that we see in stories are built into the brain, and you have them from birth without any learning, without any experience. That is in a broad brush and a broad abstraction, the same nativism that all races hold and that the Nazis held. It's knowledge by blood instead of knowledge by observation and logical inference.
What about the idea that the myths are archetypes in terms of their values, that no matter where you are in history, they're important things, they're important virtues? So, for example, strength, for example, the idea of going out in the wilderness and coming back a better person. So usually these ideas and these stories, which for me are very beautiful stories that Peterson is mentioning, isn't there a rational way to see them as values? And because they're values, in a way, they're universal and you find them in any culture.
Yeah, art deals in universals, and the stories that survive are the ones that touch something in the human experience, not in the human genome, not in an inherited Jungian collective subconscious or unconscious. If you want to say there are certain myths that speak to enduring universals of the human experience, I'm behind that. That's what Ayn Rand's theory of art is.
Yeah, let me say a word about that, because I thought a lot about that recently. So in effect, Jordan Peterson's critique of secularism is that they throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's that, you guys point out that science has discovered the way that gravity works and what actually, led to the evolution of species. And so you've thrown out all of religion, all of myth. And he says you lose a lot by that. And he's right in a profound way. From the objectivist perspective, what happens is religion is a primitive form of philosophy. It gives you a framework. Right. It gives you these stories and other forms of art that embody crucial values that human beings need to pursue and need to be able to experience as concrete stories and concrete works of art. And religion also monopolizes all of our deepest emotions that are associated with the moral idealism and reverence for, as we would put it, human potential. And so the objectivist view is that you need to and have to disentangle from religion, from myth, all of the things that are good in it, our need for a framework, our need for art, our need for these concepts that identify our highest and deepest kinds of emotions.
I know you're speaking ad hoc, but there's nothing good in religion. There's religion attempts to solve an authentic human need in some ways, but there's nothing good in religion.
Yeah, thank you for thank you for that, Harry. I definitely did misspeak, but the Jordan Peterson's view is precisely you can't disentangle those. That the only way that we can achieve those values is by holding on to religious stories and myths and taking them out of the realm of secular questioning. That is, if a value is embodied in the Bible, the story was around for 2,000 years. You can't question that value. And so that's what I think that's kind of one of the deepest divides, is we think that the whole achievement of Western history has been that philosophy was created so that we can go beyond where mankind started, and that art as a secular phenomenon is a crucial way of allowing us to hold and experience philosophy. And this is somebody who's trying to say, no, I'm not going to let religion's not going to let go of those values. And I'm, as a psychologist, am going to double down on that.
I would like to say something else against religion. Let's not glamorize Bible stories. They're not good. They're not good. They're not good in their lesson, and they're not really great stories as stories. Take Eve ate the apple that was forbidden, and Adam and Eve were banished from the garden. Wow, what a story. I can't wait to see the movie. Or Abraham is told by God to slaughter his son as a sacrifice. And he takes Isaac, I think, is it, up on the altar and he has the knife over, and God says, no, wait, I was only kidding. That's not a great story. None of these Bible stories, Jonah's swallowed by a whale and lives inside a whale. Now, if you're 6 years old, oh, that sounds exciting. Wow. But we're adults now. We don't have to pretend that Bible stories are great literature. They are very primitive tales told by shepherds who can't read 3,000, 2,000 years ago. They're not great stories. Now, you can maybe find one that's a good story, two, I know, but I'm talking about the majority. The majority are junk. Well, that's not right. They're simple-minded, primitive, unliterary.
Okay, Michael, thanks so much for your many super chats. I'm also sympathetic to the idea that there is value to be found in Peterson's command to be at the level of what art commands you to be, but only if you see it on the right context. Okay, and there's a last super chat that I have no idea what it refers to, but maybe I missed something. I don't even know who it is addressed to. Did you become more philosophically minded after you fell out of a tree as a child? Has anyone fell out of a tree as a child and I missed something here?
Harry's told that story.
I did fall out of a tree. I mean, it's a way of insulting me, but it doesn't work. Did I become more? No, I was always philosophically minded. I could tell you stories of things I was thinking about when I was 8, that are philosophical.
Seeing who asked these questions, I'm sure it's not an insult because it's a person that really values your view, because that person is asking many questions. So it's probably there's probably an angle there.
I mean, I can jog. Harry, you've brought this up in lectures talking about fear of death and how when you feel like it's inevitable that it's going to happen, you don't feel fear.
Yeah, but I didn't become more philosophical. But that's an interesting story. I fell from a 40-foot height when I was 7 going on 8. And when I realized that I had, I was falling and there was no going back and it was over, the words in my mind were, oh, well, I didn't have any fear. And I did pass out at that point. I mean, the mind has a way of protecting itself. I lost consciousness. At least I think I did, but there's retrospective amnesia that you can get. But I remember hitting branches on the way down very gently on my back. So it makes a point, which is you're not afraid when you realize it is absolutely over. There's no way to stop this. You don't feel fear.
The only experience I can relate to is if you have a car accident, the last second before you hit something, you feel almost this, oh, okay, it's happening.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, well, okay, It's over. All right.
So see how a question which sounded a bit random gave rise to an interesting short discussion. So again, thanks so much to our super chatters. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. So Harry, we're back next week. I think we're discussing but do you want to tell us what's the topic next week is?
Yeah, and I want to thank Don, because Don is one of my favorite people, and I don't know if that came across in the interchange, but I am very impressed with him and admire him, and I'm so glad that he came on the show. Next Monday, we're doing experts, the use and misuse of experts. When can you trust expert testimony, expert claims in science? How do you, as a non-expert, rationally deal with claims made by experts?
So relevant in the times that we live in. So, and Don, in case someone still hasn't got it, do you want to tell them where they can find you and why what type of stuff of value they can get from you?
Sure. So first of all, thanks, Harry, for having me and for the kind words. Thanks to ARC UK for hosting this and all of the work that you guys do. Yeah, they can go to donswriting.com. And as you mentioned, like the main thing to do is sign up for the newsletter, because each week I'm trying to, I tell you about all the stuff I'm doing, such as this event. But also that's where I share kind of my latest thinking on philosophy and communication.
Okay, so thank you very much. Many thanks to our super chatters. Thanks to the Ayn Rand Institute for supporting us. And we're going to see you all next week. Also, keep an eye either in ARC UK social media or in ARI global social media, because we post nice short clips, subtitled short clips with these videos. So in a way, you see the highlights and the best moments. Okay, this is from us. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.